From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Morning Line. And Nick Beres here with you on a Monday. I hope you're back up bright-eyed after the Super Bowl. Just have, the good thing about yesterday is the Super Bowl didn't go that late last night. And I know an awful lot of people did watch it, but we're back at it on this Monday morning and invite you to join in the conversation. We've got a good show on tap for you. It's going to be your chance to ask questions as always. We'll put the phone number up there, but as you know, gavel to gavel here, we just got done covering another high-profile trial in Davidson County, the Waffle House shooting case that's concluded. At least in the courtroom there still is another sentencing phase to go. A lot of people have questions about how that played out. I know an awful lot of you watched the trial right here on the News Channel 5 network. And if you have some questions, well, Nick Leonardo and I did the very best we could to try to answer some of those along the way. But who better to maybe get into some of the strategy that the prosecution used to get that ultimate conviction but the district attorney here in Davidson County, Glenn Funk, who joins us this morning. It's good to have you on, sir.
Good morning, Nick.
Thanks for being here. And gavel to gavel, a lot of people watched it, a lot of anticipation for this trial. And I think because the judge really, issued a gag order early on, there was not much anyone in the media knew, and there were so many revelations that came out in this trial.
Right. Well, anytime you have a trial, especially a high-profile trial like this, you've got to make sure that 12 jurors are going to base their decision on the facts that were presented, not on what they learned over the last couple of years leading up to the trial. It's really important to make sure that not only the state has a fair trial, but make double sure that the defendant has a fair trial. So that's why Judge Fishburne took that precaution, and we were fortunate because everybody knew a little bit about this case. I was going to say,
this was not like people like, what are you talking about? Right. Most of the jurors had heard of the Waffle House case. What was the trick in your jury selection process?
Well, what the judge wanted to make sure was that they did not know so much about the case that they had already formed an opinion.
Okay.
There were a number of folks that knew that right after the shooting, Travis Reinking had run away and expressed to the judge during jury selection, well, if he didn't understand the wrongfulness of his act, why did he run away? Well, most of the folks, or really all the folks that expressed that sentiment early, the judge felt, well, maybe you have already preformed an opinion, and so we're going to excuse you from this jury and let you come back on another day to hear a different case that you don't know anything about.
Sure.
So we brought in about 200 jurors, and we were able to find 14 that had not formed an opinion prior to the trial, and so we felt like we were going to have a fair jury and a fair process.
And this was a little different than other trials we've done. Do the jurors in this case, when they sit down to be selected, are they told that the nature of this case is where the defense is going to be insanity? Did they know that? Was that brought up where you just talked about how, well, he had to know right and wrong running from the scene? Were they told that? And with regard to that too, did that change the way, you might ask them, do you have mental illness in your family? Try to get a sense of the jurors had an understanding of mental illness, some more than others?
Right. Well, everybody has at least some understanding of mental health issues. This case was different because this is more than a mental health issue. There are a lot of folks that have mental health issues that don't have such severe mental health issues that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. And so, everybody has a little bit of a preconception about that, right? I mean, even the defense at one point during the trial in front of the jury said, well, he wasn't in his right mind. Well, nobody's in their right mind while they're doing a mass shooting, right? The question is, do you know the nature of your conduct, and can you appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct, right? Because you can have schizophrenia, you can have a very severe diagnosis, right? You can be bipolar, you can have severe mental health issues, but unless it reaches that threshold, then you're still accountable for your actions.
And I think everyone in the courtroom conceded that Travis Reinking is mentally ill.
For sure.
But the difference is that you can be mentally ill and still understand the difference between right and wrong, and I think you illustrated that to the jury.
Right, for sure. That was the real issue with this case. He did this shooting. We've got it on video. There was no question we had the right person once he was arrested. The police did an excellent job of finding him, identifying him, making sure that the identifications were good. There were only a couple of folks that were actually in the Waffle House that could say, yeah, that's the guy that did it. But then with the other work that the police department did, we were able to make sure that that identification was airtight, which meant that he only had two defenses really available to him, right? Which was, it was either self-defense or he was allegedly not guilty by reason of insanity. Well, the problem with that is, number one, it's pretty clear he was not acting in self-defense, and number two, then the whole case comes down to, could he appreciate the wrongfulness of what he was doing?
He had two good attorneys.
Great lawyers.
Yeah, very good lawyers, privately retained, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was what they were left with. That was the hand they were dealt. And I think even you would concede, you know, if you look at both sides going into this, not that it was easy, that you had the stronger hand because of the video, because of what everyone had seen. To make the case of insanity in today's society, the bar is so high. But they had absolutely no choice. But Travis Ranking, a lot of people say, well, why bother with this darn trial? He had a right to a trial or his day in court unless he was willing just to plead guilty to everything you charged him with, correct?
Right. There were no plea bargain offers in this case. This was not a case that a plea bargain would be appropriate. We have 60,000 arrests every year. We have only 210 available jury trial dates across 6 courts. You've got to make sure that we're trying the right cases. In this case, this was the case that we wanted to put the full resources of the state to try to make sure that not only did we get justice for these victims, but we did what we could for a deterrent factor to try to make sure that Nashville would be safe. We're
going to get into more details throughout the show about just the strategy and how this trial went, but let me just ask you this, moving forward to sentencing. We know now that he was sentenced by the jury to life in prison without parole, that for the first-degree murder charges. Now he has, I think it's coming up in May, is it not? It's a little longer of a wait, but because of the judge's situation. The sentencing that remains, and talk about, you know, what those charges are, again, attempted murder, and the significance of the sentencing there when you already know he's been put away for life in prison.
Right. The whole purpose behind criminal law, incapacitation for the folks that are so dangerous that they will hurt someone else again very soon. Deterrence, rehabilitation are two other real factors, and then there's retribution. But in this case, what we're looking at is, what's the proper sentence? Well, it's life without parole, right? That satisfies the incapacitation part. He's never going to get out of jail. Right. Never, ever. But don't these victims also deserve justice in their names as well? I mean, he killed 4 people. He tried to kill, was intending to kill everybody that was in that Waffle House, right? He did in fact shoot James Shaw. He almost shot and killed Kayla Shaw. I mean, she still suffered injuries, right? We've got 2 other folks,
horrible injuries.
Tia Wagner, Sharita Henderson, you know, both, you know, scarred for life, crippled for life, you know, on you know, assistance with walking, and not only that, the mental scars that everybody that was in that Waffle House. Well, there needs to be some justice in their names as well. And so, if the judge decides to give a severe sanction on those, because those cases all carry long sentences, if he decides to run some of these life sentences consecutive, it not only sends a message for deterrent value, but it also validates what those victims have gone through to where they get justice for themselves.
You made clear, too, on the sentencing on the first-degree murder charges, life in prison without parole, and I think you made the good case that he knew what he was doing was wrong. Right. Talk just on the other side. Had he, the concern for you, I think, as the prosecutor, had he been found not guilty by reason of insanity, and we talked about this, that doesn't mean that he would have gone free and walked out of the courtroom at that moment. So he would have been remanded to, I guess, a secure mental type institution, but that would have meant that, hey, there's a possibility he could someday get out. What was your thinking on that, and why that was such a concern to make sure that, because some people might say, either way, he's never going to get out. Is that fair to say that?
It's not fair to say that. There is a chance that the Tennessee state law changes and people could, on a life sentence, potentially be up for parole in as little as 25 years. Not that 25 years is little, right? I mean, 25 years is still an extensive sentence. But life without parole means life without parole. That's not going to be changed, right? We know that he will never be able to hurt anyone again. And so, you know, given the fact that he showed no real reluctance not only kill, but to kill everybody. I mean, he put 90 bullets together when he drove to that Waffle House. I mean, he wasn't going to just empty one clip. In fact, it was as he was changing clips that James Shaw saw that brief delay in his shooting rampage and was able to disarm him. Thank goodness. But then not only that, but he had been talking about how he was going to try to portray himself as somebody with a mental health illness and that he would be found not guilty. He said that months before this, right? A year after this, he's drawing pictures on his tray where he's essentially mocking the victims. I mean, he drew these 2 pictures on consecutive nights on the styrofoam trays that had a picture of him in a stick figure form shooting people outside the Waffle House and then mocked the victims by having a stick figure inside the Waffle House with a speech bubble saying "Run for your lives," right? I mean, this is someone who didn't just commit the crimes, but he apparently enjoyed the crimes enough to be bragging about them to his own jailers.
Yeah, that was powerful when you presented that. As we go to break, just one question, just because you touched on that. There was a racial slur written in the bubble as well. There was never a hate crime designation attached to this. In your mind, I mean, you kind of went toward what his motive was, not that you had to prove that, but I mean, do you think there was any racial motivation here for him?
Unclear as to whether there was racial motivation. Certainly not anything that we could prove. Was there a slur written on the styrofoam a year later? Yes, but from the indications that we had, was not anything that was strong enough that we could prove.
Take a break on that note. When we come back, we can take a few phone calls if you'd like. We'll continue our conversation with District Attorney General Glenn Funk about, most recently, the Waffle House trial. Just some fascinating insight into how they prepared for that and the like. And we may touch on some other issues as well right after this. Stay with us.